Hi everybody, Justin, Amson Sound. I got asked recently about the differences between the Bigger Ben, the Mogwai, OG Rev 2, and an Agartha. And I said, I think I have a video on it, and sure enough I didn't, so tonight I'm recording one. The differences between a Bigger Ben and a Mogwai SC are easier to explain. It's essentially the same circuit. With the Bigger Ben, the power supply gets bigger, its capacitance is larger, its choke is significantly larger. It makes for a quieter amp. There's some subtle changes under the hood that makes it, the Bigger Ben is slightly quieter than a Mogwai SC Revision 2, which is already significantly quieter and more powerful than a Mogwai SC Revision 1 was, which was already a really, really good amp. The major difference between the Revision 1 Mogwai SC and the Revision 1 Bigger Ben was the use of an octal front end. It can still be ordered and requested if someone wishes. The octal front end gave you a 6SL7, which was a really good tube. You can get it inexpensively in new old stock form, but you didn't have the same kind of tube rolling that you had when we went to the 9 pins. Although 8-pin tubes are amazingly romantic and very classic hi-fi sounding as far as the tonal properties they impart, because they have a big glass envelope, they are more prone to microphonics and present an elevated noise floor. By going to a 9-pin tube, a novial front end, like we have here, our noise floor dropped by about 30%. In addition, you can run a 12AX7, a 12AU7, a 5751, a 12AT7, and any variant therein, to either lower your noise floor, get more gain, have the tonal balance that you want, and everybody's going to have a different answer as far as what makes sense. So why I like a Bigger Ben is that you get our biggest transformers. So you're getting transformers with 5 output impedances. They're hugely over-spec'd. They're 20-watt RMS is what we call them, but in truth, most people would call these 50-watt transformers when you look at their core size. So you have our 5 impedances, but you're really getting tube rolling. This is a tube roller's dream amplifier from my perspective. In that, you have your novial front end, your 9-pin tube front end, then you have your power tubes that you can roll, anything from a 6L6 GC all the way up to a KT90. No, we don't do KT120s. Different amp for that. And 5 AR4s and 5 U4 compatible tubes. Back to the Mogwai SC versus Bigger Ben. The SC has 10-watt output transformers with 3 impedances, where the Bigger Ben has 5 impedance choices and 20-watt output transformers, which means lower distortion, greater intimacy, a flatter frequency response, more tonal depth and weight, bringing the performer closer to you. But on the business end, one of the nicer features is if you see right back here, there's a switch. Hopefully I can show you right there, there's a switch, and it lets you deactivate the speaker terminals. So on the Mogwai SC, you can run speakers or headphones, but you can't do them simultaneously. You can't do them cabled up at the same time, because it's all using the same dedicated transformer windings. Whereas with the Bigger Ben, we have a switch because there's enough space and it's a big switch, so that you can deactivate your speaker. So if you have like a set of Zoo Dirty Weekends, kind of a wonderful pairing with this, and then you want to switch to headphones, you just toggle the switch and you're back to headphones and your speakers are muted. So that's a really lovely, lovely feature. So transformers matter. The Mogwai SC and the Bigger Ben, literally your output transformer doubles in size and your choke quadruples in size. So these are all big nodal points. Stepped attenuator versus Alps pot, and you have the Jupiter caps. Now you can order a Mogwai SC with Jupiters, but it's an added charge. It's built into the price of the Bigger Ben because it's meant to be a one price, one choice kind of amplifier, but tube rolling. So why an Agartha versus a Bigger Ben? So an Agartha or a Rockwell is a single-ended direct-heated triode. The Rockwell uses a 6B4G, which is the 8-pin equivalent of the 6A3. So you can even use old 6A3s with adapters, but 6B4Gs are really, really inexpensive, undervalued triodes. They impart that same sort of 300B DHT sound at a fraction of the cost for new old stock tubes. Whereas the Agartha is giving you the 300B and everything that that means. And both of those amps have pots to dial down the noise floor, which is a nice feature. They have hum pots, so that's a really nice feature to them. But you're wedded to that single triode that you choose at the purchase time, whether it be the Rockwell with the 6B4G or the Agartha with the 300B. An Agartha or a Rockwell has a slightly de-emphasized mid-range. What that does is it allows everything else to be more present from my perspective, and so everything feels more live performance-like. So everything is has more air and space and doesn't feel as congested, perhaps. So that's a DHT sound. That's a traditional DHT sound. Now, sometimes people will equate direct heated triodes, 300Bs, with syrupiness. That was one version, but that is more of an 80s, 90s take on 300B amps. A lot of distortion and a really slow power supply, and it's very dense. But the traditional 30s, 40s, 50s, traditional 300B sound is that of air, space, life-likeness, live music-like. Now, I think tetrodes, which is more like the Bigger Ben, tetrodes and pentodes, give us a thicker mid-range. And for me, that's a little bit more my preferred sound. As much as I love triodes and their air and space, I like tonal density. I like wallop and big power amps, which the Bigger Ben, more than doubles the power of the Rockwell, or the Rockwell is very powerful. The Rockwell is about 5 watts. The Agartha is somewhere in the 6 watt range. The Bigger Ben we can get as much as 8 watts depending on what we're doing with it as far as tube choices. But back to tube choices. So again, talked about the 9-pin, talked about our power tubes, and talked about a rectifier. Here's examples of a 5U4 rectifier, for which we have installed already from JJ. Gives you more voltage sag. It's going to give you more sustain, a slightly wetter sound. The resonances are going to just hang in the air longer. So it's a not quite a reverb, but it's a really good sound if you want to either soften things or humanize things. A 5AR4, like we have here from Tungsol, is going to give you 30% more power. It's also going to give you a faster sound, faster transient response. And just by swapping out your rectifier, you're going to actually see how the amp changes with it. As this is a zero feedback amp, everything you do to it changes its sound, and that's part of the love of it. But the real conversation, aside from old school 5U4s, can be had inexpensively. 5AR4s you can get inexpensively as well, but you can get these for like $30, new old stock. These are going to run you like $250 to be new old stock. Both worthwhile. I would own both, roll both in new form, and decide which one I liked more, and then buy the new old stock version of it. Now, my preferred power tube in general is the Tungsol 6L6GC STR. It is a super beefy tube, big plate structures, lots of tensioning against the glass, if you see. So these don't vibrate, they're not microphonic. Really, really, really punchy tube. Punches above its weight, makes you think it's more powerful than it is. I have 5 other choices just to show you some options. Now, if we wanted to nearly double the power, the JJ KT88 is a nearly bulletproof tube and is super, super, super awesome if you want bass and you want density and the highs are still there, but it is definitely a sub-bass tube choice. If you have a Susvara, this is what you're going to want to play with. This and a 5AR4 are like magic. And I'd run a 12AX7 in all likelihood. But then you also have a great choice, which is the 6CA7. A 6CA7 is the American version of an EL34. It's actually a different tube. Even though they are exactly compatible, it's a different tube with a different sound. I'm not an EL34 kind of guy, but I love a 6CA7. On to our more rare, more interesting. So lots of people know that I talk about the 6384 from Bendix. It is a bulletproof tube in the truest sense of the word. It was used in intercontinental ballistic missiles to power the gyro mechanism that actually steered the missile. You could almost blow this tube up with have pieces of it missing and it will still function correctly. This is the 6889, it has a top cap instead, and it is fantastic. Now, in truth, from a spec perspective, it's a 606 GB that's military spec, that's, you know, over-spec'd and sounds amazing. So because this is an over-spec tube, even though we're supposed to use 606 GCs, it works in this amp perfectly fine. Because of all of the mica and support structure of this tube that makes it so bulletproof, it takes forever in a year to heat up. So like at least an hour of heating up before it gets to a happy place, and it actually will sound better after 3 hours of use. On the more rare side, the tube is not rare. This top cap is rare. This top cap is what makes this tube possible. It's actually a very, very strange, unusual top cap on this tube. This is another Bendix power tube. I believe it's the 7403. They're very easy to be had. They are actually 606 GC tubes. They're not really KT88s, even though people tell you they are. Put into a KT88 amp, potentially you could red plate it. They don't red plate in this amp, but it's just something to be careful of. But the top cap that you buy doesn't fit the tube correctly, and you actually have to get the correct top cap, which I only have two of, unfortunately. This tube is the big brother to the 6889 or the 6384, and is magic in this amp. Just, you know, it's like an RCA 606 GC black plate with the base of a KT88. It's just fantastic. So why do we pick a Bigger Ben? Because we can roll tubes. We can roll any number of tubes. We have, you know, 5 impedances to select from, and we have every feature that we want. So we can go big power, or we can throttle down our power to fit our headphone choice and our listening patterns. Hope this helps. Thanks, guys.